Good afternoon. Hello. My name is Jejuana Brown, and I am here to welcome you to All Aboard, Creating Inclusive Board Cultures that Support Community Engagement. Briefly, before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items and some Zoom basics just to orientate all of us. This session is being recorded, as you can see. You will be able to access it later. The Dropbox link, which should be in the chat, has session resources. If you would like to turn off your camera, feel free to do so. And though we encourage you to have it on, we won't have breakout sessions for this time, but you will have a panel discussion. Feel free to toggle your settings to speaker view or grid view. This is in the top right of the settings. Speaker view highlights the speakers and the grid view shows all the boxes. Closed captioning can be accessed by clicking Otter AI on the top left of your screen. It will open another window. We have muted everyone to eliminate background noise. Chat is being monitored through questions. Please send your questions in the chat to questions, and you are able to chat privately to a specific person. You can select the Dropbox menu and find that specific person to send a message to. Finally, please be sure to visit our exhibitor space to check out some of the conference's sponsors. The link is in the chat as well. And we would like to extend a gracious thank you to all of the sponsors for the conference. As people are still coming in, we are going to get started. So very, very excited to have three special guests here. Like I said, my name is Jejuana Brown. I'm the Director of Equity and Inclusion Programs from Greater Cleveland Partnership. And I am pleased to welcome three colleagues from across Northeast Ohio who will be sharing more with you around this topic around board diversity. So first up, I have Keith Burgess with Fifth Third Bank, and I am going to turn it over to him in the interest of time because our format is that each of our panelists will have 10 minutes to speak individually, and then we will come back as a panel. We'll have a few questions, and then we will entertain questions from the chat. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to do all of that. It's a very packed session, and so thank you all for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to Keith. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Jejuana. Give me a second here as I share my screen, and hopefully I do this right. Okay, so looks like I have it here. Okay, so good afternoon. Again, my name is Keith Burgess. I'm the group head of community development and lending with Fifth Third Bank. But just as important, I'm also a board member of the National Equity Fund. And I've served on numerous nonprofit boards, primarily throughout Ohio on a local as well as a state level. And so today, I'm going to talk to you about diversity and inclusion for skeptics. And of course, being a banker, all bankers are skeptical about everything. So I am going to be consistent with the way most bankers think, with a little bit of twist. Okay, so that's my bio. Okay, here we go. So a lot of us have heard about Einstein's theory of relativity, but did you know that Einstein also had a theory of diversity of inclusion? And let me share that with you. It is the ratio of do to say greater than 1 carried out to 3 decimal point places, plus diversity and inclusion equals a positive change in productivity. Now, in plain English, what does that mean? The ratio of what you do must be greater than what you say. When you add diversity and inclusion into a board or any corporate culture, then undoubtedly you can, if you do this right, you can get increased productivity. So that's Einstein's theory of diversity of inclusion. And since I'm a banker, I always think of things in numbers and very pragmatic, as well as, like I said, with a little bit of skepticism there. So let me jump into the presentation. That was banker humor, I guess. So what is diversity? I think, we generally know, sort of the bases that, we all talk about: race, ethnicity, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, disability status. Those are, I think, the 5 that you see all the time in terms of, the prohibited bases that you can't discriminate against. But there are other things such as personality, which is also, I think, very important, especially when you think about, let's say, for example, a car salesperson. A used car salesperson is typically perceived as being, outgoing and obnoxious. So if every car dealership hires a car salesman who fit that particular mode, then we'll continue to repeat the same thing. But is it not possible that if we find a person who is not as loud and obnoxious and who's really good with people, would it surprise you if that person could sell more cars? Well, it wouldn't surprise me. I've seen those types of things, and those are the types of biases that we have to sort of get away from. So let's talk a little bit about inclusion. What is inclusion? So I think, that's when you genuinely bring, diverse talent into an organization's, decision-making processes with the intention. You have to be very intentional about how we leverage the power of diversity. So it is not just, counting, numbers, checking off boxes. It can't be more than that. That's been happening, and that's not really resulted in any change. So it has to be a genuine intent. I think also another way to look at it is that it would be considered, in my viewpoint, the democratization of power within that organization, the willingness to share power and decision making with diverse groups of people within that organization. Or if we want to just put it plain and simple, make me feel welcome. Vera Myers, she put it like this: diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And I think most of us like to dance. So why does all of this stuff seem so difficult? Let's just sort of run down through, history, right? We have 50 years of equal treatment under the law. We hear that phrase all the time. We hear the Black Lives Matter. They still do. They always have. It's nothing new. Love is love. That's always been the case. Silence is compliance. We hear all of these things, and the phrases sound so nice and neat. Why don't we really see any change? Here we are in this day and age. Research done by a group called Board Source Research back in 2017 looked at all of this. Boards diversifying, and both at the corporate level and the nonprofit boards. And their research indicated up through, I think it was published in 2018, but at the time, the data was based upon 2017, that they really hadn't seen much change in the diversity composition of boards. Another pretty interesting thing is just earlier this summer, there was a memo written by the CEO of Wells Fargo. And this is a quote from that memo. The unfortunate reality is that there is a very limited pool of Black talent to recruit from. Again, pretty puzzling why all this seems to be so difficult. So here's what I want to try to do for you. I want to try to connect the dots and try to make a real plain, simple, pragmatic argument as to why it works. Business research indicates that only 20 to 30% of employees are truly engaged. One of the reasons is that managers and leaders of the organizations, they always go to those same 20 to 30% of the people. And I would say I've seen this happen at the board level as well. In fact, you can see that same type of behavior happen anywhere. You can see it happen in a classroom. Anywhere you have group dynamics, you're generally going to see that happen. So it's not surprising that it happens in the workplace or at the board level. I call this group, this 20 to 30%, we call them the go-to crew. This go-to crew often shares the same demographic and personality characteristics as the leadership because there's comfort in the familiar. Staying in this comfort zone, however, leads to groupthink and organizations repeating the same old behaviors, all while giving that lip service, but expecting increased performance and different results or different outcomes. Other employees who are outside of that go-to crew, we'll call them the folks who are on the bubble. They all recognize what's happening. Now they go do their jobs. They show up at the board meetings, but they really don't go beyond that. Oftentimes, folks will be fairly content, especially if you're being paid as an employee, volunteer, maybe different. It might be something, good to get out, the house to give back. But nonetheless, folks continue to remain content, but resentful and really don't engage because, they're not being asked what their opinions are in a lot of these cases. So companies continue to spend millions of dollars on employee engagement surveys. I think every one of us work at companies, and you always see these surveys that come out every year. There are employee engagement programs, but yet low employee engagement and high employee turnover is still a significant and very costly problem. So how should a skeptic think about diversity and inclusion? So I would offer this. So if you have a diverse and engaged workforce and an executive team and the board, all the way from the bottom of the organization all the way to the top, and the board is holding the executive director accountable for the actions at the work level. Know this, that the workplace talent pool, it is and will continue to become more diverse on all levels: race, ethnicity, the age spectrum, gender identity, sexual orientation, all those things that we've identified. And let me not be remiss. Obviously, there are a lot more beyond, again, those general bases that we generally talk about. There are diverse ways of thinking and looking at problems, and if we take in those different perspectives, they will lead to very innovative solutions. My wife, she likes to do puzzles. And one time we had a big puzzle party over our house. And one of the most interesting things is how people realize about putting a puzzle together. Each and every one of us thinks differently. And based upon your education, you may think one particular way. That doesn't mean that a person with a lesser education, the different way of thinking is inferior. And then we have to get out of those types of behaviors where we allow the ego to get in our way of these things. But if we're open to looking at solving a problem, and when you're trying to put together a puzzle and you have people around that puzzle, they're looking at it from a lot of different perspectives. And it's amazing how fast you can complete a 1,000-piece puzzle when you have a lot of different people applying different approaches to solving that, putting that puzzle together. And so organizations are faced with shrinking budgets and have to do more with less. How many times have you as a nonprofit out there sat around and said, you know what, I wish we didn't have so much funding. We have way more funding than what we know what to do with. That's never the case. It's never the case in business as well. We are all faced with tight budgets in this current economy. Businesses, organizations are looking to tighten their belts, looking to make cuts so that they can continue to be productive. And so this is going to be important to move people from disengagement to a higher level of engagement. And so what if an organization, so this is the pragmatic approach. So what if the organization could truly holistically embrace diversity and inclusion all the way from the top of the board, executive leadership, down to the employee, and tap into these underutilized resources? How much more could productivity increase if that organization could move that employee engagement to 70 or 80% simply by leveraging what they already have in the budget? You don't even have to go out and try to find more funding. And so just think about this as a for-profit corporation. That is about increasing the bottom line. That is about returning shareholder value. As a nonprofit, that is about being accountable to your mission, to the community that you serve, to the purpose that you serve. How much more could we achieve? How much more in way of services could we provide if we could be more productive? So My closing thought, though, and this is really really important. There's a lot of lip service that is given to diversity and inclusion. You know, these discussions around diversity have been going on for a while. You've seen the morphing to go to inclusion that now says, you know, make me feel welcome. And you know, and now we talk about fairness, in other words, equity. So you hear this diversity and inclusion and equity, right? So we need to have diverse viewpoints in the organization. We need to be inclusive. We need to make people feel welcome, or like Vera Meyer said, we need to ask people to dance, and then we need to be fair. That's what we're seeing in society. Society today is crying out for fairness. It's all that simple. But here's my closing thought, though. Watch what they do, not what they say. That's what's most important. Thanks.
Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome.
While we are watching Victor Leandry pull up his presentation, Victor is with Lorraine El Centro. And so looking forward to hearing him.
So thank you. My name is Victor Leandri. I am the director of El Centro. El Centro is a Latino social services in Lorain County, a city that have 30% of Latinos. We're one of the largest Latino cities in Ohio. And as you can imagine, we're the only Latino social services. So I get a lot of invitations for boards. So next. And I apologize, I'm not managing my PowerPoint, so you will hear me saying next a lot. So I apologize for that. But these are some of the boards that I currently, I am a member of. I am the newest, one of the newest member of the Ohio City Association, something that I'm very proud. And some of the board members that I participate currently is the Mercy Health for Lorain County Office of Aging, the MAC, Ohio Federation of Health and Equity and Social Justice. Some of my past participation in boards include a national board for Latinos that it was Unidos US, the national known before by National Council of La Raza, and also I was Ohio Commission of Minority Health. However, I have to say, I'm not encouraging people or support people to belong to all these boards. There's a magnet to it. There's a skills that you have to develop. And part of my job as the director of Latino Social Services is to sit in board and represent the Latino community in boards. That's why I am able to do it. But it's still, even that is part of my job, it's still very time consuming, trying to keep active and have roles, leadership roles in all these boards. And as active as I like to be, I'm going to be the chair for one in the next year. I'm the secretary for another one. I lead a fundraising committee for another one. So it's really very time consuming, and it's trying to keep all those dots together. So I'm not encouraging nobody to do this. I will encourage somebody, if you're looking to be a board member or start getting into boards, I will encourage that you choose one and stick with that, and maybe two, but no more than this. Next. And I think the next slides, I think he already mentioned some of this. We're in a time of crisis. We know with all this Black Lives Matters movement and racial equity protests, we know with this COVID-19, how it have really highlighted how communities of colors are really impacted by COVID-19 and the disparity in health. And all that together have brought to the attention on now under the microscope, like what are the board compositions of many organizations, like what is the diversity aspect of it. And I have to emphasize that even though the scopes are looking at the other communities, the white communities, we as minorities, we have a responsibility to be sure that our boards ourselves are very well diverse and representative of the community too. So the microscope have to go both ways. Let's not forget that. But right now, we know that one of the biggest issues is that most of the general boards doesn't have the minority representation. Next. So Latinos make 18.5 of the United States, Latinos. And it's predicted that at least a million 18-year-old Latinos turn 18 every year, 17 years old turn 18 every year. So There's a prediction that the Latino community will continue to rise because it's a very young community. Most of the Latino community is under 18, and almost a million will turn 18 every single year. Think about the impact of that for board development, for economics, and everything else. But only 4% of the board seats in the United States are held by Latinos, and 16.1%, and this is a study made by the Fortune 500 board seat, say that boards, minorities make 16.1. Now, that is race ethnic minorities. That is no, you see other reports that say that there's minorities may add almost 30% of board seats. But when you see that high number, it's because they're including white females in those numbers that is also a minority, but they're included in the minority numbers for boards. But in reality, it's people of colors. We have a lower representation. It's 16.1. Next. So I'm here to talk a little bit about my experience as board member. So this next slide that you're going to see is literally my opinion. So don't try to look for this in research. This is literally my opinion. So board pipeline, this is what I see in regards to recruitment. A lot of boards say that they don't find a minority, and they're using, every time they're using the same person from a minority group, going from one board to another board to another board. And they don't realize that minority organizations or non-profit really develop great board members, because we, like, for example, my board, 51% of my board have to be Latino, So I am always looking for Latinos in the communities that are not that involved in the community, that doesn't have that many boards in their plates, that they can dedicate their time to our board. And we invest on training them and really getting them a great orientation and training them and giving them the opportunity to shine. And we have many community members that leave our board that are excellent board members, but then those big corporations keep going to those recognized names and recycling them. And then there's a board mismatch. A lot of times I see this in the community too, that big organizations get a minority, a Latino in their board, and they're so happy about it, but then they don't realize that that minority might come with is not engaged in the community, or might have a bad reputation in the community, and then they're questioning why they are not able to reach to the Latino community, and it's because they didn't do the homework in getting that person that really reflect their values and their missions, and that would represent the Latino community also as well. Next. So this is what I do when I get invitations for board. I have to have, they have to engage me from the get-go, and I have to have an open communication with them. And that communication include a face-to-face interview. It's not a letter, it's not an email. We have to have a face-to-face interview with the director or one of the board members and talk about this board and why are you selecting me. We need to talk about that. I need to be sure that you're not electing me just because I'm a Latino. I need to be sure that you are valuing the expertise that I bring in from the nonprofit and from being a social worker and being a leader in the community. So I need to be sure that you are valuing me and my expertise before you are more than you're valuing me being a minority. You have to be respected. I'm a Latino, and I tell you how it is. I just finished in a meeting this morning that I was invited. I was like, listen, I'm going to tell you how it is, because you need to hear the reality of our Latino community. If you are asking me to represent our Latino community, I'm going to give you the feedback that I think you need to know from your organization in regards to engaging to the Latino community, and you need to accept that because you invited me to be the voice of this community, and I'm going to advocate for that community. And I need to feel that it's a genuine commitment that this organization have to really reach out to the Latino community. I have a bad experience many years ago when I joined a board that is predominant white, older males, and I really believe in the organization, and I thought I can make a change in this organization. And for almost a year, I was the only minority group in that board, and trying to change the way of thought and how to really reach out to the Latino communities was so difficult for me, because it was not a genuine interest on reaching out to the Latino community. I ended stepping out after a year from this board. Next. So we need to be sure that we are preparing minorities to be board members too. There's many programs out there that prepare people for boards, but you also see a lot of representation of minority in those organizations. So we need to be sure that we're preparing possible board members for our community. And in preparation for boards, and I was just talking about this, I encourage people to have that interview and to talk to the boards that they're inviting you in regards to what is their mission, what are they trying to accomplish in the Latino community. But be sure that your mission and your passion align with that organization. Let's be sure that that's the first step to take, that your mission personally, your goals, your passion align with that organization mission and passions too as well. So it's that clear expectation. Something that I talk a lot when they invite me to boards is my financial contribution, because I sit in so many boards. I am the director of a nonprofit. We don't make a lot of money. I am very sure that when people are inviting me to the board, that I talk about that expectation of fundraising, that I say, like, listen, what is the expectation of the financial expectation that you're expecting for me, because I might not be able to accomplish that. So that's part of my first conversation. Be sure that the time and the energy is required for that board, that you have that on it. For example, when they invited me, you invited me to a board. Actually, there's one right now that the meetings are at 7 o'clock in the morning, and that's the Mercy Health meetings. Is at 7 o'clock, and I make an exception for that board. But if you invited me for a board at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's like, I already have one. It's like, no. I prefer to be working late at night. Last night, I woke up to my house at 8:30, almost at 8:30 at night. So if you have a board meeting that is at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, 7 o'clock, or during the day, I'm on it. You invited me to a meeting that I meet at 7:30, even at 8, it's like, I need to consider, because I know I'm not going to be able to be as responsible as I want. So be sure that the commitment and the time and the energy that you have that. And also be clear about any conflict of interest from the get-go. Talk about that. That is very important, that you walk into a board and join a board, knowing that if there's any possible conflict of interest, that is very clear and mentioned from the beginning. Next. I think I'm almost done here. So, and it's as part of something that I would recommend for those of you that are thinking of becoming a board members, educate yourself and understand what is the role of a board. I have seen in many boards that I see too, that you see people that even with many degrees that have never had the experience of sitting in a board, and they sit in a board and they have a really wrong idea of what a board member should be doing. Like they want to micromanage, or they want to supervise employees. Like that's not your role. So be sure that you understand what, and you get educated about the board, or in the board orientation, or take your own training in regards to what is a board responsibility. Be sure that you read the Robert Rules books, and that you understand how to run a meeting also, and what is the expectation. And even though not all the boards use the Robert Rule, is a very good basic information that you should have, because most of the meetings have some component of the Robert Rules. Communicate clear and punctually. Be sure that you're on top of those emails in regards to boards that you participate, that you are answering, because you need to know in the other side. Sometimes when you are running an organization, you're waiting for board members to answer emails or make some decisions. It's so frustrating, and sometimes so time sensitive. So be sure that if you are in boards, that you have the time to be responsive to emails and communication. And then something that I do every year, and I think this is the last slide, so I will finish with this. Something that I do every year, every January, I sit down and I evaluate myself in all the boards that I sit. And I make a decision if I'm going to continue in that board, or if I'm going to step down, depending if they're using me, or if I feel that I'm welcome in that board, if I feel that I'm making a difference, I make a decision to or step down or continue in that board. So I do that every single year. Last year, I stepped down on one of the boards. This year, I already have one in my mind that's like, listen, they're not using my expertise how I'm supposed to be using it. I don't feel that I'm engaging in this board. So I am about to write a letter of resignation. And in that way, I keep open to boards that are really going to engage with me in my community. And with that, I think the next one is just my contact information. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Victor. While we are waiting for Stephanie McHenry with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress to load up her slides, I want to encourage the attendees to drop in the chat, where are you from? So, you know, if you can share if you are on a board, and what area, what area are you from? And if you are on a board. We'd like to get a pulse for who's in the room. Thank you.
There we go. I was trying to unmute myself. I couldn't find the right button. Hello, everyone. And thanks so much for the opportunity to share with you this afternoon. I'm going to tell you the story of a community development corporation's journey to a more inclusive board and strategy that would better serve its neighborhood. So my day job, I'm Vice President for Policy Advocacy and Strategic Initiatives for Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. We're an intermediary that works a lot with community development corporations, as well as some directly with families in neighborhoods here in the city of Cleveland. But today I'm really wearing my other hat, one of my other hats, and that is as a volunteer board leader. I have been serving on boards, both for-profit and nonprofit, for decades, since I started when I was age 12, and it's really part of my DNA. And frankly, being an African-American professional with, some leadership skills and finance skills, it has not been difficult to serve on boards. In fact, usually oversubscribed, as Victor was describing a little bit earlier. But I did want to give you a sense of the kinds of boards that I am currently serving on, as well as those that I have in the past. And of course, today I'm talking to you about that service at Midtown, Cleveland, where I was chair for the last 2 years. So our discussion today, really, I just want to spend a few minutes telling you about the Midtown board and strategy transformation. And it really was a transformation, and share some takeaways at the end that hopefully you can apply to your situations as volunteer board leaders, especially with regard to using or figuring out how to leverage diversity to help make your organizations better, as Keith was describing earlier. But first, let me go back to the day job for just a minute. Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, you can see here our mission is to foster inclusive communities of choice and opportunity throughout Cleveland. And one of the significant factors there is throughout Cleveland, because we have some neighborhoods that are doing great, others that are not doing so well, and there is a racial component to a lot of what you see in terms of differences. So it is our mission to even that out a bit. And when we're successful, you can see that we will have neighborhoods that are vibrant with diverse people and places where people want to live, learn, work, invest, and play. So that's who Cleveland Neighborhood Progress is. But back to Midtown, back to my after day job, before day actually, Victor, this was one of those 7:30 meetings. Everything was at 7:30 in the morning with this one. So I feel you there. But I've been aware of Midtown for many years, having worked in the community development and economic development field in Cleveland. And I could really describe it as a neighborhood chamber of commerce is what it really felt like. It was really focusing on enhancing the neighborhood for the sake of the 600 plus businesses that operate there and their 18,000 or so employees. And that was really the focus of the organization. So as you can see from the list of milestones, it was really about cleaning the neighborhood up for the sake of those businesses, dealt with blighted buildings. You'll note in 1987, they had to take some direct action with regard to some criminal activity and prostitution that was prevalent in the neighborhood at that time, and to try to attract players in. And there was success at that. I mean, for many years, you'll see in 1998, the organization was recognized by the Brookings Institution for having turned the neighborhood around in terms of some of those those basic things that make for a safe place for businesses. And then you'll note that unlike a lot of Cleveland neighborhoods, there were relatively few residents that were not part of the businesses, only about 2,000 of them. And most of them were renters, and most of them were African American. So I came onto the board in 2016 as part of the transformation, and I served as chair from 2018 through 2020. So, you know, if it was a chamber of business, chamber of commerce, working on the businesses, taking care of the neighborhood from their perspective, and it had been doing that for a number of years, what was the issue? Well, as many issues show up for nonprofits, the organization started to have financial difficulties, meaning that their costs were outstripping the revenue, membership revenue, as well as foundation revenue. And so I want to say here, let me just pause and just say, because many of you on this call or on this meeting may have been involved with Midtown in the past or may currently be. So my comments about the challenges here are in no way to be disrespectful of all the great work that went into that organization for many, many years. And as we saw in previous slides, actually accomplished a lot. So I do not mean to be disrespectful to that past at all. However, it is a reality that the largest and first funder could see that there needed to be a change in order for the organization to continue to be effective and actually to be more effective and to take better advantage of all the assets in the neighborhood. So the issue showed up as, you know, lack of responsiveness to the business issues, you know, being unable financially and resource-wise to really deal with the things that the businesses wanted to have dealt with. There wasn't a lot of focus on the neighborhood outside of the businesses, meaning, you know, what were the other assets that could have been highlighted in order to make it more of a place where people wanted to come and spend a little time versus just pass through. We'll talk about that again in a minute. And frankly, the relative homogeneity of the board, both in terms of race, gender, as well as perspectives. Most of those, I think all those board members, 99% were business owners in Midtown, which makes sense from an affinity perspective. I mean, yes, you want the people that are most invested in the neighborhood around the table in good numbers. However, there could be some other opportunities to get different energy in the room that could also help the neighborhood. And then frankly, there were some actual as well as perceived conflicts of interest in that, you know, in the Midtown meetings and in the work, there would be real estate deals that would come up. There would be other type of investment opportunities. And we had a lot of real estate developers themselves sitting around kind of getting inside information. And that could also be intimidating for any new players that might want to come and do work in the neighborhood because they'll assume that the folks that are involved on the board were going to get all the business anyway. So those were some of the things that were challenging this long, long toiling institution as we turned into the 2015 to 2016s. So that major funder, which, you know, when a major funder speaks and you're a nonprofit, you should definitely listen. And that major funder concluded that it was time to take fairly dramatic action in order to save the organization and to have it live up to its potential for the neighborhood. So for example, when you talk about neighborhood potential, I talked about 18,000 employees that come to Midtown to work every day. But there were tens of thousands of other people that drove through on their way to and from the east side of Cleveland neighborhoods, as well as the east suburbs, especially the inner ring eastern suburbs, on their way through Midtown to downtown to go to work, to the theater district, to the sports arenas, to the major university, as well as a major community college. So you had lots of traffic going through the neighborhood, but they only saw it as a pass through. And unfortunately, I think the organization had not figured out how to capitalize on all that traffic and all that opportunity to present something to those folks to make them want to stay and spend a little money and, you know, maybe do a little bit of investment. It was also time to embrace the diverse residents of Midtown who have a perspective, and you'll see when I talk about some of our accomplishments, could really highlight some new opportunities to celebrate the neighborhood in ways that the business owners perhaps were not able to see because that just wasn't their focus. They were driving in and driving out every day. Again, that's nothing to criticize what happened in the past. The other big change we made there is that, you know, instead of having almost 100% Midtown business owners as board members, we took that number down and we made room for, you know, 30–40% of those board members to come in from outside of the neighborhood, but who had a good interest or a good set of skills to apply and had a passion for helping the neighborhood to improve. So that was the opportunity that we all saw. So the board itself was transformed. We created another board where some of the folks that have been on for a long time, an advisory board that we could keep connected to that history and definitely honor them. And then we also brought in a lot of new players that fit some of the description that I just gave you in terms of having diverse perspectives. It included residents of the neighborhood. It also included folks that understood how to make a place that's not just for business, but is also for recreation and other uses. So skipping over months of hard work for the sake of time, this newly formed board came up with this vision and mission that you see. Vision being Midtown Cleveland is a connected community in the center of it all, an inclusive place for people to innovate, create, prosper, and live. And then that vision played out in a mission, which is to leverage its diverse assets to develop a dynamic neighborhood that unites the city's downtown and innovation districts. So some of the key words there to let you know that something was changing. Connected community. It didn't just say businesses, it said connected community. An inclusive place. Talked about people living there. Talked about leveraging diverse assets, as well as putting downtown and innovation districts together. So that is what came out of our hard work as the start of what would become a four-pronged strategy, which you'll see briefly outlined here. The plan's got 4 pillars. It's connecting the community, again, that word community, creating a complete neighborhood, building the brand, and strengthening the capacity of the organization. So, you know, some of the things that came out of that again reflect the change in terms of the community work to really look at what the residents needed and create programming around that. Looking at the brand, you know, figure out what it is that will be attractive to have people stop in Midtown for dinner on the way to work or to the theater or on their way back home. And then strengthen the capacity, make sure that the board and the team had what they needed to be successful in carrying out the plan. So just to conclude with some major lessons, it's almost impossible to evolve an organization's vision and focus without some new blood on the board. And the new blood needs to be diverse, not just in the physical that you can see of ethnicity. It also has to be a different perspective, a different way of looking at a thing. Keith was talking about different ways to put a puzzle together. That was so valuable in what we did. And then also to that point, you know, neighborhood assets often cannot be seen unless the right eyes are in the room, right? I mean, unless the right people are looking at a thing, they may not even see what there is to be built upon. And this third one, you know, board leadership during a major transformation has to be able to genuinely relate to the past and the rich history of an organization, as well as a future view. I was able to do that. I mean, my past, I've been a bank president, I was CFO of a university, worked with small businesses. So I understood the business side. So you couldn't tell me I didn't understand that. But then I also have always been involved in place-based organizations that can see value in neighborhoods and its people. So I was able to bridge both the past of that organization as well as its future vision. And then, moving to an agenda that's more inclusive can be difficult for boards. So it's something that has to maintain focus, and training needs to be a part of it. So in case you want to flip to the back of the book, we have been successful at implementing this plan. A lot of good things have happened in Midtown in the last several years. I'll just point out two, and then I'll be quiet because I know my time's up. We work with the residents to do some programming around something called Leo's Casino, which was a hopping music club, nightclub in Cleveland, in the Midtown area, where all the Motown people would come through. And it was a really rich memory for a lot of the residents. So we've done program around that, including someone started a radio station. And then probably the crown jewel is that the Cleveland Foundation has decided to move its headquarters into Midtown. And they did that because they saw that we were working to be inclusive in the neighborhood, and their space is going to provide a lot of space for community folks to interact. So thank you very much. I hope there's some things there that can help you.
Thank you, Stephanie. I want to also thank the attendees for letting us know where you are from. It looks like I have been told that there are representatives from all 9 of the states that are participating in the conference. And so thank you all for joining. I saw Texas and Massachusetts, Illinois, as well as Florida and Ohio. So thank you so much. And it looks like there is quite a few of you who are serving on boards. And we have 2 questions from the audience. I'm going to ask one of my questions that we had prepared, and then we'll go to those 2 questions, and that will probably close us out. So the first question is, do any of the boards you have, do any of the boards you all serve on have expectations for the board to participate in diversity training and or racial equity training? I believe that Stephanie indicated that Midtown has Racial Equity Institute training. So if that is it, then if so, what kind and how frequently?
Well, I'll just speak quickly for Midtown. It was, everyone needed to go to an REI training. There were a couple offerings. One was a half day, the other was a 2-day training. And then we also engaged a consulting firm to meet with the staff on a very regular basis and probably come into the board once a year.
For me, this is Victor from Lorraine. I have not had that experience of a board asking me to participate in a diversity training. I've been in part of there's boards that have diversity committees, and I sit on that, but not as an expectation, as a kind of orientation or become part of a new board members. I haven't had that experience, and this is a great idea. I think we're going to see that being a requirement pretty soon.
Keith, and then I can share mine.
Yeah, I've not seen that yet. I will say that NEF has been in transition. It has a new CEO. Has been that transition is, I guess, a little bit over a year now, and we are working on some strategic planning. And I think that definitely has to be a part of it, or definitely will be a part of it. So that's just happening, but I can't say that I've been involved in racial equity training as a board member.
So I'll add this one for free. I serve on the board of the Journey Center for Safety and Healing, formerly the Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center. And we have been, for the past 2 years, carving out time during our board retreat to facilitate diversity training, racial equity training. And it has been tremendously received very well. And so that is something that I would encourage people to consider. And I am happy to share with you some of the things that we have done regarding that. I'm going to go to a question from our panelists, from our attendees. Similar to what Victor and Stephanie said, this is from Dana, I believe, I might be mispronouncing it. Many leaders of color in our town have very full plates of volunteering and board responsibilities already. We have had some success reaching out to existing board member circles on LinkedIn to find new board members, but they're asking, what are some other suggestions for creative recruiting possibilities?
Listen, I just had that experience this morning. Somebody called me to invite me to another board, and I was saying, listen, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot do it. However, if you're willing to take one of my staff, and they will have all my support in behalf of the organization, I can send you amazing directors or staff that I have here in the administrative team. And they were like, oh yes, we will take that. So I think at some points the community needs to start understanding that it's not only the director of this agency or this president of this place, or they need to start creating pathway for new leaders in the community, and they need to be able to accept those in the community. And for those, I've been reading the chat, for those of you that are not directors and are part of our organization, if you have that passion to sit in a board, talk to your director and let them know, listen, I'm ready, I think I'm ready, or I want to be trained to be in a board. Step that step and talk to your director, because sometimes we are looking for those of you to step up and really help us with the load of participating in boards.
Excellent point, Victor. There is another question that was in the chat from Sharonda. She says that often boards recruit for quote unquote recruit for diversity without thinking about their board culture and how it will change with new folks being added. What steps have you all taken to integrate new members and continually educate the board as a group?
That is a big one for me. When I recruit people from Centro, I always talk about the dynamic in my boards, because you would think sometimes we are very passionate, most of our Latinos, and the way we talk to each other in the boards. If you're not from our culture and you're coming to our board, you would think like, oh my God, these people are mad at each other. But then after a while, and I have a board member that is participating here, so, and it's one of my best board members, Amy Garcia. She's participating in this panel, but she will agree with me. It is part of our culture. So in my orientation, I talk to people about how we operate and how we can disagree in my board. And we have those conversations that you will think, oh my God, these people are disagreeing. But at the end of the board, everybody's left like literally like how we started, like friends and board members, and we made our decisions as a group, and that's how we end. But the dynamic in between all those Latinos, it is sometimes for new board members that are not from our culture, it's a cultural shock. So part of my orientation is to talk to people about that.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, I think that one of the things is to try to keep focus, obviously, on the job at hand, which is to keep people focused on trying to achieve those missions. The other thing that we've done a little bit is when I was chair, I made sure I met with every new board member one-on-one, and then also to find out what their passions were and to really bring them into the room and let them know that they don't have to wait the 5 meetings before they say anything, to just sort of make it a more welcoming place. And then also to assign a buddy. If you assign someone that's been on the board to a new board member, so that they can ask all those questions offline, like, are these guys really mad at each other? Why are they yelling at each other? So to give them a way to ease into it with someone that's got more experience on the board.
Thank you. Keith, how can those recruiting underrepresented groups to the board avoid tokenism?
That's a good question. I think it gets to, some of the comments that you've heard here earlier today. And, in particularly, in my presentation, it's just not about adding, adding people of color, just, sort of checking boxes. So it gets to be about understanding really more the substance of who you're bringing on the board. And what Stephanie had mentioned was that board mentorship of pairing up new board members with, more senior board members and perhaps even, not necessarily connected demographically, maybe different demographically might be a good thing. And so ultimately it gets to engagement. What you don't want to have is you bring on new board members and those new board members sit there silently, not contributing. They're just basically being checked off. They're not really being engaged. So again, you have to make them feel welcome and bring them into that engagement so that they can contribute and so that they can feel comfortable express. I can't say I've seen, Victor's board meetings. I might have to sit in to see how it goes, but sounds like everybody feels really welcome. So that's the key.
Thank you. And this is going to be our final question because we are 4 minutes out. And the final question is, in your opinion, and this goes for any of you all, can you name a board diversity initiative or community engagement initiative that a board has done very well? I know we always talk about the negatives, but what are some examples that you would want to share or recommend to our attendees to check out? Oh, Stephanie, you on?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I already talked about Midtown. That's my best example, so I'll be quiet now.
Keith or Victor? Victor?
I concur. I think Stephanie's Midtown example was really a great sort of case study, if you would, on how that change needed to happen. And I live here in Cleveland, and I am one of those folks who commuted from the eastern suburbs downtown and would always go through University Circle, Midtown, and watching that. And in fact, as a banker, I financed some of those projects there along Euclid. So I'm very familiar with that. And so I think that's perfect case study.
Thank you. Victor?
No, I was just going to say, recently I sit in the board of Mercy Health. It's a hospital. It's our hospital, and lately in the inclusion committee, we really gave time to have a conversation instead of having agenda. Sometimes we're so wrapped up on putting agendas together and filling out that agenda with topics or items, and sometimes, especially with inclusions and diversion, it is about having that conversation. And it became one of the biggest conversations that we have had as an organization, with so many takeaways. And there was even tears during the meetings, because it was a safe place for everybody to talk. And it was a very meaningful with everything that is happening right now, to everybody to express how they were feeling, not even as part of the committee, but as part of the community. It was incredible. So sometimes allowing your agenda sometimes to have conversations.
Thank you. I am encouraged. The chat has been saying, thank you to the points that all three of you has made. So I definitely want to give a round of applause to Keith Burgess, Victor Leandri, and Stephanie McHenry. Thank you all so much for sharing. One of the things that we are doing is doing a closing words of inspiration. And so I'm going to do it out of order. I'm going to do my closing inspiration first, and then I'll do the housekeeping. And I think that all of this stems from one word, and that is courage. And the quote that I'd like to share is, without courage, we cannot practice any other virtue with consistency. We can't be kind, true, merciful, generous, or honest. And that is by Dr. Maya Angelou.